This is week 5 of the spring trimester. I'm Jennifer Marie and this is my Atelier diary. This is the last week to work on my portrait painting. So this whole portrait painting has been 2.5 weeks. And this last week, Matt has been really pushing me to just focus on correcting the drawing and getting the drawing as accurate as possible. So the drawing of the painting just means making sure that all the shapes are as specific and accurate as I can get them. And as I do this and as I'm working with the paint, I feel like I'm finally getting an idea of how to get the paint to be handled better and not look as fussy or more like I kind of did it in one shot, even though it's taken 2.5 weeks to get to this point, making the painting look a little bit more immediate and not so overworked. So for example, with working on the drawing, I'll be working on transitions and trying to make sure that my transitions are looking simple and effortless. So I'll work on the transitions, getting this light area to pass into this dark area, and I'll be kind of like working those two things back and forth. And once I'm thinking that it's looking pretty good, I will take my brush and fill it up with a little bit more paint and add a thicker brush stroke over the transitions. So any of that fussy looking from getting that transition to like lay over or to become smooth from the light to the dark, laying over that thicker brush stroke over it makes that transition look more simplistic and kind of like I just did it and not like I took all that time to get it smoothed out. And so another example of doing that, one area that I think I did it fairly successfully is in the eyebrows. The transition from the dark eye socket up into the forehead is really quite soft and gradual. So I worked on getting those soft transitions, but then there's this lighter plane on his eye that is above his eyebrows. And so what I did was, once I got those transitions looking smooth into the light, I really loaded up my brush with the exact light color that needed to go right above all those transitions and just laid one brush stroke that went down like this and up like this. And so the attention then is more so in that light area right there, which looks really simple and easy, like I did it really quickly. And then less attention then is brought to all of those smoother transitions that's going up from the dark eye socket into the light. I'm still kind of figuring out this, so I don't know if I'm explaining it well, because I don't know if I quite understand what I'm doing yet, but I like the direction that it's going, I like the direction that I'm going with how to work the paint. One area of the painting that I was really not happy with was Brian's nose, and Matt showed me some pictures of Sargent noses and told me to look at Rembrandt's noses, and he was pointing out that on the nose is pretty bright generally, definitely in this painting, because it's a plane that's facing up towards the light. But he was saying if you take that thin highlight that's off of a nose, it's actually really gradual, smooth, not contrasted transitions that is from the nose that blends right into the cheek. And so when I was looking at Sargent and Rembrandt noses and how they painted them, that became pretty evident in how simple it looks. Like there's not too much work to show the structure of the nose, and that the structure of the nose was really from the shadow shape under the tip of the nose and then the shadow shape from the eye socket. But all of those transitions in the light were really gradual and not as contrasted as what I had. So I fixed the painting in that way and really lessened the contrast to try and just get like a smooth blend from the top of the nose into the cheek. And then the next day Magda looked at my painting and she still said I had too much contrast. The side of the nose was too dark in comparison to the cheek and the top of the nose. So I even lessened it even more. So I'm finding there's way less attention or heavy contrast there than I thought there was. Also with this portrait, Matt painted on the portrait a little bit, which is really good. I like it when Matt and Magda will paint on my painting because I feel like I really get a lot out of watching them, and they probably don't even need to be talking to me, like what they're doing, just watching them is really helpful. Just how they'll do something different with a brush that I hadn't thought of, or how they'll pull paint across something that I hadn't thought of. So it was really helpful, and Matt was showing me in the shadows how to get more colorful shadows and how to better unify shadows, especially in the mouth area for Brian, which it's kind of a confusing spot because with a mustache covering it, it does kind of get confusing with the how to pull structure out of that, and not that whole area is strictly shadow either, because there is light that kind of spills in on the hairs of the mustache. So he was showing me, like, by pushing contrast on the shadow line and then also getting them more colorful. And what he would do is he would first take a brush, the shadow brush, and he would put the dark shadow color on it, say like under the nose, because under the nose is really colorful. So he would put the shadow color under the nose, but then he would take pure red and start dabbing that into it, and it would look super colorful, too colorful because there's pure red on it. But then he would take some of the shadow color and kind of like blend it into it, but not, it wouldn't be overly blended either, so you could still see a lot of hints of those red coming through the shadow color, but blended enough where it's still unified. So he was doing that in a lot of areas, and then when he stopped working on it and I was working on other parts of the painting, and I'd have to go back into like the shadow under the nose, and I would try and do it, and I couldn't. I can't get it as colorful yet as what he's doing, so I definitely want to work on that so the shadows have a certain like beauty to them, and they're not like too grayed down or just like a dark color, but having hints of red and yellow in them I think is really interesting, and I want to definitely work on that. And one last thing with this portrait I want to talk about is how I was contrasting how I was painting the face in the background compared to the chest. I've been looking at a lot of Rembrandts. He's my favorite, Sargent's, a lot of other painters, classical painters, the masters, and seeing how they do makeup paintings, and it definitely seems like they won't just do one trick, they'll paint areas in a painting different than they'll paint other areas in a painting. So I wanted to do that for the chest, to also not bring too much attention to the chest, so everything stays in the focal point, which is the face. So for the face, it was a lot of laying down brush strokes to build up the face. And so for the chest, what I did was I took the biggest brushes that I had and I mixed up some colors that represented what's on the chest, the lighter areas. And I was more, instead of laying down brush strokes, I would put paint down on the canvas and kind of scrub it around and kind of mix the colors into each other on the canvas. So there's a lot of canvas mixing, and also taking, for any shadows or where the forms turned away on the, like the shoulders or the arms, I would take the shadow color and kind of start scrubbing that into areas. So the chest area is painted a lot thinner because I'm not just laying down brush strokes, I'm kind of more like mushing paint into each other, which I kind of like the effect of how that looks, definitely compared to the face. I think if I had more time with this painting though, I would like to put some more thicker, like laying down brush strokes on top of that and see what that effect looks like. But for the time limit of this painting, I think that's fine. And so this is my first painting portrait that I've done, so I'm gonna get a video out to put this in my finished projects playlist, so I can talk more about this painting, because I've definitely learned a whole lot, and I definitely want to get around to doing more portraits because it was a lot of fun and I want to get better at them. My cast painting now is really coming along. I was struggling last week and this week with getting the key of the cast right, meaning the darkest darks and the lightest lights, making sure that those two made sense, because my painting was looking darker than how it does in nature. But I think by the end of this week I am really close to getting the key. I think it's really, really close. At the beginning of the week, Magda looked at my cast for critique, and she told me that I need to be looking at the main baby, which is the middle baby, and that baby's head and leg is what is farthest off of the relief, so there's more contrast in those areas, and it's also the most colorful areas. And so she was saying that everything else in relation needs to be less contrast and look like it sits farther back in the relief. So for working and pushing the key of the painting, I thought I should start in the focal area, which is the baby head. So what I did was I was thinking about all of the keys of the painting, and so for keying something, it's not just finding the lightest light and darkest dark, but it's finding your contrast in everything. So the most colorful to the most gray, the sharpest edges to the softest edges. And so I looked at the baby's head and I was like, well, that's the most colorful part of the painting. So I'm gonna see how far I can push this key. So I took pure yellow ochre and I put it on the baby's head. And then I started working in the background behind all of the baby's heads and really graying everything down and making sure that there wasn't a lot of contrast at all back there. And then I stepped back and my painting looked crazy. And I was like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? So for Matt's critique that day, he came up to my painting and was like, whoa, and he took my palette knife and he started to scrape off the pure yellow ochre that I had on the baby's head, which looked crazy. I shouldn't have. I mean, I know what I was thinking and why I did it, but it didn't look very naturalistic because the baby's head isn't that colorful, so it's just looking crazy. So he ended up scraping the paint off, and then I was saying that I don't know how to work on the background because the background does have a lot of contrast to it in the cast. It is colorful, there's a lot of different colors in it. There's light areas and fairly dark areas in the background. So he was showing me how I could paint that. And so he mixed up some colors on the palette and was just like putting big brush strokes down. And he would start in an area and start to work his way out. And then he would start in another area in the background and work his way out. And those areas would just get bigger until he's working on the whole background at once, laying paint down and just making sure that even though there are contrasts of color and also value, making sure that it's still unified. And watching him do that, like before when he was painting on my portrait painting, it was really helpful to see how he's laying the paint down and how to show something being as unified as it is while still showing the color and value contrast in it. And so the next day, I'm looking at this painting and I'm not quite sure what I should do next. The background in relation to the baby's head is making a lot of sense, and so I don't know if I should be like work down the main baby's body or exactly what I should be doing. So I was talking to Matt about this and he was saying to think of the whole entire cast as just a figure, and where you would start is making sure the shadows relate to the background, which they do in my painting, but then you start in like the focal points and you start to work your way down, so the chest of the figure. And while he was doing it, he was saying like this whole top portion of the cast is like the chest of a figure and moving down. And as he was saying that, it started to make more sense, because I think even though I'm trying not to do this, I keep trying to segment this cast up in my mind and say that I'm going to be working on the babies this day, then I'll work on the background this day, then I'm going to be working on this one baby, then this one baby. But instead of doing that, I should be working how the light is flowing across the figure, or how the light is flowing across the whole cast. So there's areas in the painting that you can definitely see big light movements. So instead of like picking the piece apart and doing it very piecemeal, piece by piece, I started to do it in really big, I guess, horizontal areas across the cast. And also, instead of just looking at the cast straight on like this, I would turn my head sideways, which kind of abstracts what you're looking at. And so instead of thinking I'm painting the arm and the arm into the chest and the chest into the belly, it's more just seeing how light is hitting form, so you're rather painting light rather than body parts. So I hope this is all making sense. This week I've learned so much with portraits and how to work on a really complicated cast, since I'm mostly used to, with cast work at least, working on one object. and the cast is one object, but it's really complicated, and I don't think I realized how complicated it would be. So I'm really glad that I'm doing this and learning how, even if you have a lot of objects and something is really complex, how you paint it, which I'm seeing that how you paint it is you really are looking at the shadows to the background, and then once you have that in, you're just looking at how light is hitting form and not trying to piecemeal the thing, but think of the whole entire image and how light is hitting the whole entire image.